Boldwood presents After the Party, written by C.L. Swatman and read by Mira Dovreni. Prologue. Now. April 2025. The Ugly Truth with Hannah Hastings. Series 16, Episode 1, The Summer of Discontent. Hello and welcome to a brand new week. I hope you're all well, and a huge welcome to any new Ugly Truthers. My name is Hannah Hastings and I'm thrilled to have you here. Well, what a week it's been. You'll be pleased to know that after concluding the Brightmoor case last week, I've been hard at work, and this week I'm thrilled to reveal that I have a brand spanking new case for you all. As always, I've been trawling through the archives to find a case that I really hope to be able to sink my teeth into. As regular listeners will know, I can't always promise that I'll get results. Sometimes there just isn't a result to find, and other times it's simply because the truth doesn't want to be revealed. But you also know that I will do my absolute best. As always, though, I need your help, so please do send me anything you think might be relevant or useful to the case as it unfolds, to the usual email address, hannah@theuglytruth.co.uk. Together, let's see if we can get to the bottom of this case. So now, without further ado, let me introduce you and tell you everything I know so far. The year was 2004, and the lives of 4 final year students at the University of East Anglia were about to be changed forever, with the arrival of a mysterious girl called Summer Carpenter. Chapter 1. Now. Amy snaps her eyes open, her heart thumping, her skin covered in a thin sheen of sweat. Something has woken her. What? She holds her breath, waiting, staring into the liquid black of the night. But there's nothing to hear except the whistle of the wind along the side of the house and the tick, tick, tick of the radiator cooling on this unseasonably cold spring night. She slowly lets out her breath, terror still pulsing in her ears, and tries to tell herself that everything is fine. She's perfectly safe here, in the cocoon of her home. Besides, Benny hasn't stirred and everything wakes him. She reaches down and rubs the velvety softness of his ear, and he rolls over belly exposed, his tail thumping lethargically against the mattress. "We're okay, aren't we, Benny boy?" Amy says, pressing her nose into his head. Her protector whimpers and goes back to sleep. But Amy is wide awake now. She glances at the clock beside her, the numbers glowing at her through the darkness. 3:45 a.m. Oh, too early to get up, but she knows she'll never get back to sleep. She pushes the duvet aside and swings her legs out of bed, pressing her feet into the cool wood of the floorboards. She shivers, the air chilly against her damp skin, then stands and snatches her dressing gown from the back of the door and wraps it round herself. But as she pulls the door open, she stops again, her heart in her throat. She definitely heard something that time. She steps onto the landing, the floorboards squeaking beneath her tread. And there it is again, a soft tapping sound. But where's it coming from? She lets her breathing settle and strains her ears, but it seems to have stopped once more. She presses her fingertips to the wall opposite her bedroom door. It'll just be something scurrying around in the walls or in the closed-up part of her home. Of course it will. She stands still for another moment, then takes a deep breath and heads for the stairs. Downstairs, the kitchen feels otherworldly in the low glow of the moonlight, but she doesn't switch the light on. The long wall of glass that stretches across the back of the house makes her feel exposed when it's dark outside. She fills the kettle and stands looking into the midnight garden, arms folded. The patio table and chairs closest to the house are clear, but other shapes loom in the darkness, sending her overactive mind into overdrive. Is that a figure standing there watching her? Or just the hedge, swaying slightly in the breeze? Is that someone running away? Or just the shadowy shape of a neighbourhood cat giving chase? The kettle clicks off and she turns away, berating herself. What's got into her lately? She's lived on her own for most of her adult life, and she's never felt as jittery as she does right now. She pours boiling water onto a ginger tea bag and takes it to the table and sits, facing out towards the garden. She screams as something touches her foot, but when she looks down, it's just Benny, sniffing her toes. "God, Benny, you gave me a fright. I didn't hear you come down the stairs," she says, rubbing the top of his head. He looks up at her, warm chocolate brown eyes glinting in the semi-darkness, and rests his head on her thigh. Benny's presence has calmed her in this moment, but, she thinks, it's his recent strange behaviour that has put her on edge in the first place. A few days ago, he began barking wildly in the corner of the living room, facing the wall as though staring something down. But when she'd gone over to investigate, there was nothing to see except a few balls of fluff and a dead spider. She hadn't thought much about it until 2 days later, when he'd started barking and growling at the house as they'd walked up the garden path after a long walk on the beach. He'd stopped dead, staring up at the upstairs window on the side of the house that was still closed up and undeveloped, and dug his heels in, the hackles on his back raised. Eventually, whatever had bothered him must have gone, because he relented and let himself be led up the garden path and inside. But Amy had felt uneasy ever since. Benny isn't naturally nervous, and neither is she, so what exactly is going on? Suddenly, the total darkness of the night feels like too much, and Amy stands, picks up a mug, and gives Benny's collar a tug. "Let's go back to bed, Ben," she says, and together they trot up the stairs. Amy makes sure to close the bedroom door tightly, dragging a chair in front of it, just in case. In the cold light of day the next morning, Amy feels ridiculous and shakes her head at herself as she returns the chair to its rightful place. She's perfectly safe. This house is her haven away from the world. Nothing will happen to her here. Besides, if anyone did break in, Benny would alert the whole neighbourhood, she's sure of it. He makes enough fuss when the postman comes, or someone dares to walk another dog past the house. But last night he didn't seem fazed at all. They go downstairs together, Benny getting under Amy's feet as they reach the bottom step. "You'll be the death of me one day, dog," she says, smiling, as she swings round the bottom of the stairs and heads towards the kitchen. This morning, the glass wall looks benign rather than threatening, although a thick mist hangs over the garden, shrouding it in pale grey. Amy makes a coffee and gives Benny his breakfast, which he wolfs down in about 3 bites, then looks at her forlornly for more. "Nice try, Buster," she says, picking up her coffee and heading back towards the stairs. She's intending to drink her coffee in bed before taking Benny out for his morning walk. But when she reaches the bottom of the stairs, she pauses. The doorway opposite is boarded up, as it has been for the last few years, and she stares at it now as if it might somehow allow her to see right through it. She places her coffee on the side table and leans into the wood, presses her ear against it. Perhaps, if she listens carefully enough, she'll be able to work out what the sound was that woke her last night. She holds her breath for a moment, listening. But there's nothing, of course, just as she'd expected. She picks up her coffee and is about to climb the stairs when Benny gives a sharp bark from the kitchen. Her heart leaps into her throat as she hurries through to see what's bothered him. But rather than looking worried, he's standing by the back door with his lead in his mouth and wagging his tail at her. She sighs and smiles at him. "All right, you win. Let's go out." Minutes later, she's dressed and clipping Benny's lead on. He spins in excited circles as she laces her trainers and pants at the door while she pulls her gloves on. They slip out of the back door and round the side of the house, through the gate and out onto the street. Benny tugs at his lead, eager to get to the beach, stopping to sniff a tree or a fence or a hedge every now and then. It's cold for late April, and Amy is glad of her extra layer, the fog keeping the cool night air trapped beneath it. It feels like the air is sticking to her skin, and she shivers in a sudden breeze. She picks up the pace to a gentle jog, enjoying the feeling of her heart rate ramping up, her breath coming long and steady to fill her lungs, then out again. The road rises upwards a little, and the gradient makes her push her legs, her arms pumping at her sides. Benny trots along happily for a while, happy just to be out. When they reach the steps down to the beach, Amy stops and allows her breath to return to normal as Benny races ahead, down onto the sand. It felt good, that brief run. She's not as fit as she used to be, and her lungs burn in the cold air, but it feels invigorating to get her heart pumping sometimes, let her spirits soar. She starts down the stairs, gripping the handrail so she doesn't slip on the damp wooden boards. The fog is so thick now, the grey slab of sea is invisible, and she's halfway down the steps before she realises she doesn't have a clue where Benny is. Pulse quickening, she hurries down the last few steps and jumps onto the sand. A gust of wind whips salty droplets into her eyes, and a plastic bottle skitters forlornly over the dips and bumps of the sand. "Benny!" she calls, casting her eyes left, right, right. Her breath catches in her chest. Where is he? "Benny boy!" She runs in the direction of the sea, the sand becoming firmer beneath her feet with every step. She can barely see more than a few metres in front of her, and she listens for the patter of feet or the pant of his breath. But the roar of the waves fills her ears, and she's suddenly disorientated, spinning wildly. "Benny, please!" she cries, a sob catching her unawares as she paces up and down the shoreline, water splashing into her trainers, soaking her socks. It's icy cold, but she doesn't care. She runs, then stops, runs, then stops, shouting Benny's name over and over. Squints through the fog, mirages forming and evaporating in the mist. Then a patch clears briefly, and she sees a shape, fully formed this time. A person. "Excuse me," she shouts, running after them. But they're moving away from her, not turning back. "Please, have you seen my dog?" she cries. But the figure has gone now, evaporated into the fog as if they were never there at all. She spins on her heels and heads back towards the sea, slipping on stones in her haste. And then she hears it. The sweetest sound she's ever heard, clear as a bell, Benny's bark. "Benny!" she shouts, and before she can even work out which direction the sound is coming from, he's there, wagging his tail and jumping up excitedly, and she bends down and wraps her arms around him, so relieved she could cry. "Where did you go, boy?" she says, cupping his chin in her hands and looking into his dark eyes. She stays crouched down with Benny in the sand for a few minutes, and by the time she stands again, the fog has begun to lift, shifting up over the cliffs so she can see the line of beach huts once more, make out the groin stretching into the water, a ship in the distance. She glances round, but she's totally alone on the beach now. Did she imagine the other person, her mind playing tricks on her in her panic? It wouldn't be the first time. But even if there had been someone there, they're long gone now. She lets Benny run around for a while, dashing in and out of the waves, picking up sticks and bringing them to her, chasing after them as she throws them for him. But being by the sea isn't bringing her the same sense of calm today as it usually does. And eventually, the strange prickling sensation that creeps along her spine drives her away, back towards home. By the time they turn the corner into their street, they're both weary. The weather is unrecognisable now, the sun pushing through the clouds and burning away the fog, and Amy begins to feel herself relax at last. Honestly, what is wrong with her these days? She never used to be this jittery, scared of her own shadow. What on earth made her think something had happened to Benny, when she knows how much he loves to race off and sniff around the rocks? And why would she imagine someone spying on her through the fog? They reach the front gate and she pushes it open. But as they step through, Benny drops low, his hackles up, a growl in his throat. Guard dog mode. He's staring at the upstairs window again, the one that's taped up with newspaper. And Amy follows his gaze, heart thumping. She squints up at the window, shading her eyes, but all she can see is the sun reflected back in the dusty glass. She reaches down and presses her hand against his head, reassuring. "It's okay, boy. It's okay," she says gently. At first he ignores her, but slowly the fur on his tail deflates. His head comes up and he looks at her. "What was it? What spooked you?" He nuzzles into her, as though trying to tell her something. "I wish you could answer me," she says, standing. She throws the bedroom one last glance, then tugs Benny up the path to the front door and lets them both in. Once inside, Benny trots off, seemingly unperturbed by whatever had scared him just a moment before. But Amy stands for a moment and holds her breath, the sound of her pulse thumping through her body, and listens for a sound. Any sound that shouldn't be there. There's nothing. She slips off her trainers, jacket and hat and heads into the kitchen, flicks on the kettle. Outside, the garden looks inviting now, the old willow tree swaying in a light breeze, the sun slowly spreading in from the far left-hand corner like butter, a patch of light in the shade. She presses her fingers to the glass. She'd always dreamed of having a whole wall of glass looking out into the garden. It was one of the things that had sealed the deal for her when she'd bought this place as a complete wreck almost 7 years before, that the moment she'd stepped into this gloomy room, she could picture it filled with sunlight on a warm spring day. And until now, she'd loved spending time in this room, working in here whenever circumstances allowed, pottering around cooking, flinging the doors open to the outside world. Right now, though, these very doors are making her feel anxious, exposed, as though she's being watched. At the sound of the kettle clicking off, she turns and pours boiling water onto a mint tea bag, bends to give Benny a head rub as she passes him curled up in his basket, and heads upstairs to shower. She's got a busy day ahead. It's time to focus. Another thing Amy loves about this house, at least the bit she finished renovating before she ran out of money, is that it has big, bright rooms. The bedroom she's converted into her therapy room, where she brings her clients, is one she's particularly proud of. It's airy and light, but the wooden blinds at the window give it a sense of privacy that her clients often need. Today she has 4 counselling clients, starting at 11 a.m. For the first 3 sessions, she's as engaged as she always is, her worries folded away like a spare blanket in the corner of her mind as she listens to them talk. She asks questions where required and tries to help them find the answers they need. But halfway through her final session, as her client is deep into a childhood memory of his father, she's distracted by a sound coming from the wall beside her. It's intermittent, as though someone is moving, then stopping, then moving again, fingers down a wall. She tries to focus, to really listen to what her client is saying, but the sound is insistent, and by the time the session ends, she feels wrung out from the effort of trying to hold it together. The moment she closes the front door behind her, she collapses onto the bottom step, legs trembling. She can't hear the noise from here, but it persisted all the way through the last half of that hour, and she isn't sure she has the energy to go back upstairs and see if she can still hear it. Isn't sure she wants to. Benny nuzzles his nose into her leg, and she pulls him to her, kissing his soft brown head. "Come upstairs with me, Ben," she says, hauling herself reluctantly to her feet. Benny doesn't need asking twice, and races up ahead, but at the top, instead of turning left into her bedroom where he likes to leap onto the bed immediately, he turns right into her counselling room, hackles raised again. Oh shit. She follows, trying not to make any noise. She prays Benny won't bark. They both stand, listening for a moment to the quiet of the room, waiting. Then there it is again. Scratch, scratch. Stop. Scratch, scratch. Benny's bark almost makes Amy's heart stop, but it also galvanises her into action, and she marches down the stairs, Benny hot on her heels. She slips on her jacket and shoes, grabs her keys and mobile, and throws open the front door. She's going to find out, once and for all, what's going on. Chapter 2. Now. It's still light outside, but this part of the house is in shadow, and when they head round to the side door, the entrance to the other part of the house, it's so quiet Amy can hear her own heartbeat. She glances round nervously, then fumbles with her keys, trying to find the right one for the door. This side of the house has been locked up for years, and she only ever comes in here occasionally to make sure a family of rats hasn't moved in or a leaking water pipe hasn't caused untold damage. This is the first time she's felt scared coming into her own home, though, and a sudden surge of fury hits her. She won't let whatever or whoever is unsettling her win. It's time to find out once and for all whether this is all in her imagination, or whether there really is someone in here. The key slips into the lock easily and the door opens slowly, the old hinges squealing in protest. Grimacing, she steps inside, as Benny sniffs about in the dust. She stands for a moment, taking in the room, a sense of sadness overwhelming her. She'd had such grand plans for this side of the house, but sadly had run out of money and been forced to board it all up just before the pandemic hit. Subsequent price rises in any kind of building work meant her dream of opening up the entire house anytime soon is getting further and further out of reach. She walks through the room, her steps echoing loudly on the bare floorboards. She pauses every few steps and listens. Benny does the same, his head cocked on one side. But he doesn't seem unduly worried, and it's helping to quell her fears about what she might find. Surely if there was someone in here, Benny would be on edge, barking or growling. After checking the entire downstairs, not too hard as most of the walls are missing and there are hardly any places to hide, they climb the stairs leading up to the first floor. Here the layout is an exact mirror image of the finished side of the house. Smaller room to the left, the other bedroom and what was once a bathroom further along off a corridor. She steps up onto the last step and takes a left towards the room that backs onto her counselling room, where she'd heard the noises early this afternoon. The door is slightly open, dusty light slipping through the crack. She'd planned to wait outside for a moment to work out whether she could hear anything before pushing the door open, but Benny has other ideas and barges the door straight open. Light fills the corridor and gives her the courage to step inside. Her hands are clammy and her legs shake as she steps inside to find nothing. The room is completely empty, apart from a bed without a mattress pushed up against the far wall and a pair of fusty old curtains hooked over the curtain pole, the way they always were. Dust hovers in the air, and she walks across the room and pulls open the door of the old built-in wardrobes. Empty. She runs her finger along a shelf and it comes back dusty. There's no one here, and by the looks of it, there hasn't been for a long time. The relief makes her knees weak, and she turns to find Benny, but he's disappeared again, impatient to sniff out all the other rooms he hasn't been in for so long. Feeling the adrenaline seep from her body, she gives the other rooms a cursory glance, before going back down the stairs, satisfied there's nobody here. "Benny!" she calls, heading for the door, suddenly keen to leave. But there's no subsequent tapping of claws against wooden floorboards, and for the second time that day, her heart flips as she realises she doesn't know where he's gone. "Benny?" She heads back across the room and up the stairs again, and eventually finds Benny in the small bedroom where they'd started, this time with his head buried in the corner of the wardrobe. He doesn't look round when she enters, and she steps forward to see what's caught his attention. It's dark inside the cupboard, so she pulls her phone from her back pocket and shines the torch inside. Benny backs away, and she leans in to see what he was sniffing. There's something there, but she can't quite make out what it is, so she reaches her hand in. It brushes against something cold and plastic, and she pulls it out into the light, holds it up and examines it. It's a toothbrush. A yellow toothbrush. Confused, she looks down to where Benny is watching her, eyes wide, tail whirling furiously, pleased with his treasure. "What's this doing here?" she says, her voice bouncing off the empty walls. She runs her fingers across the bristles. Dry. It doesn't look old, but then again, it would only have been about a decade since whoever had lived here before moved out, and plastic lasts for centuries. It must have been here all along, overlooked among the frenzied building work, waiting for that room to be renovated before revealing itself, hidden in the shadows. She tucks it into her back pocket, heads down the stairs, this time with Benny in tow, and feels relief wash over her like a wave as she locks the door and leaves the old place behind. "I can't believe you went in there alone if you thought there was someone there," Janet scolds, placing a heap of sausage and mash in front of Amy, big enough to feed an entire building site. "I didn't go alone, I had Benny," Amy says, picking up her fork and plunging it into the creamy mash. There's far too much food here, but she knows how delicious and buttery her mum's mashed potato is, and she savours the first bite, grateful for some company right now. Janet slides into the chair opposite. "Yes, well, you know full well Simon would have come with you if you'd have said," she says, pressing her palm against her partner Simon's hand, which rests on the table beside his knife. "Course I would have," Simon says, picking up his fork and stabbing a sausage with it. "I know, thank you, but I didn't need to because I just told you there was no one there anyway." Amy tries not to sigh, aware she behaves like a belligerent child whenever Simon's about. Creepy Simon, as she calls him. In her head only. Her mum would be devastated if she knew how she felt. Moved in with her mum 5 years ago. They'd met during lockdown in the queue for a supermarket, when Simon had accidentally breached the 2-metre rule with his trolley, and they'd got chatting about how on earth COVID-19 knew how far it was allowed to travel. When Janet had announced that their subsequent Zoom dates had progressed to more, Amy had been horrified, and even more so when she told her Simon was moving in. "We just both think there is no point in hanging around at our age," she'd said, as though they were both at death's door, even though Janet was still a sprightly 63. Even though Simon still made Amy uncomfortable with his slightly off jokes and ill-fitting clothes, there was nothing she could put her finger on, and for some reason he seemed to make her mum happy, so she kept quiet. Still, he would hardly be her first choice of person to call if she wanted to feel less nervous about going somewhere alone. "Why don't you come and stay here for a bit if you're worried?" "Mum," Janet glances up. "What?" "You know what." Janet looks at her defiantly. "Yes, well, I'm only saying. You know I don't like you living alone in that big old place. It's creepy. I just wish you'd sell it and buy somewhere smaller. Better for, well, you know, just you." Amy doesn't bite. She knows her mum means well. It's just she's heard it 100 times before. Why is she still single? Why doesn't she buy somewhere smaller? More like her mum's tiny 2 up, 2 down, where she's lived for the last 40 years of her life, and that she never had any ambition to upgrade, she means. But Amy loves her house. She'd bought it almost 7 years ago, after leaving her finance job in the city and moving back home following well, some called it a breakdown. She preferred to think of herself as simply having come to her senses after working in such a toxic environment for so long. But she knew others didn't agree, and she couldn't really blame them. A collapse, both mentally and physically, in the middle of the trading floor, had led to her taking some time off and coming home to the Norfolk seaside town where she'd grown up, and where she'd then spent 6 weeks, almost catatonic, in her old childhood bedroom. But good food, her mum's persistence, and making the decision to quit her job and her toxic relationship once and for all, finally helped her get better, get back out in the world. She'd retrained as a grief counsellor and rescued Benny as a puppy. Then, with the money she'd saved during her years in the city, she'd bought her house. Unlived in for at least 2 years previously, it was a huge, old double-fronted mansion facing the sea. And despite it being an absolute wreck, from the moment she stepped inside, she knew she wanted to live there. Just her and Benny. But then COVID had hit, and the house was only half done, and building work ground to a halt. The job had already cost more than expected, so she'd resigned herself to living in the finished half for a couple of years, and finishing it later. Only later had never come, and now she wonders whether she'll ever find the money to complete it. So she understands why her mum simply can't understand the attraction of the place. But to Amy, it represents a fresh start, a new her, a life where she can leave behind the soulless, live-to-work person she had become over the years, and why she had become that person was another story entirely, and have the life she wanted for the first time since she was a teenager. It was also her sanctuary against the world, her shield. "I'm fine, Mum," she says, her voice gentler now. "I've got Benny, and we know there's nobody there. I think I just got spooked on the beach earlier." "The beach?" Her mum looks up sharply. "What happened on the beach?" "Bugger." "Nothing really, it was just foggy and I thought someone was watching us and then I lost Benny and—" She trails off, shrugs. "I was being paranoid." Janet reaches her hand out and presses it onto Amy's forearm. "Love, are you sure you're okay? This is so unlike you." Amy feels a burning behind her eyes and blinks back the tears she can't let fall. Because if she starts, she'll never stop. "I'm not having another breakdown, Mum, I promise." Janet watches her for a moment longer, searching her daughter's face for any sign she's not telling her the truth, then finally pulls her hand away. "Well, if you get spooked again, promise me you'll ring me or Simon." "Yes, please promise, Amy. I'll always come and look after you," Simon says, smiling at her across the table. Amy forces a smile back. Why does everything he says sound vaguely threatening when she knows he just means well? "I promise." The rest of the meal passes amicably enough. Janet chats easily about the people she's seen and the meal she enjoyed at the local pub the other day. Not for the first time, Amy wonders how her mum can be so happy when her world has always been so small, but chastises herself immediately. She'd tried to leave this place and go out into the world, and look where that had got her. There's something about this town that draws you back eventually, some force that doesn't want to let you go. As soon as it seems polite to leave, Amy stands, stifling a yawn. "You're off already, love?" The disappointment in Janet's voice sends a flash of guilt through Amy. "Sorry, Mum, it's been a long day." "OK." Janet gathers up the plates and places them in the sink and fills it with soapy water. By the time she's done, Benny has his lead on and Amy has slipped her trainers back on. When she turns to say goodbye, she sees her mum nudging Simon. He clears his throat theatrically. "Can I give you a lift home, love?" he says. "It's only a 10-minute walk," Amy says. "It's 15 minutes at least, and I don't like the idea of you being out there alone at this time of night." Amy steps towards her mum and takes her hands. "Mum, it's only 9 o'clock and I've got Benny with me. I'm sorry I worried you, but honestly, everything's fine. I'm a big girl." Janet nods. "I know. I'm sorry, love. But will you still do your old mum a favour?" Amy smiles and lets go of Janet's hands. "I'll text you the second I'm through the door, OK?" "Thank you." Amy would be lying if she said she hadn't been tempted to accept Simon's offer of a lift. But she didn't want to worry her mum anymore, and she refuses to be spooked. Having said that, she was more relieved than normal to finally shut the door behind them and close all the curtains this evening. The streets had felt a little more menacing than usual tonight, secrets hidden in the shadows. Although she'd been tired when she'd left her mum's, Amy's wide awake now, so she switches on the TV for company and settles onto the sofa, Benny curling up beside her. She tickles his head and clicks her phone on. A bit of mindless scrolling before bed might be just what she needs to tire her out. She checks her social media, then the main news websites, hoping for something to hold her attention. But her mind is skittering, incapable of settling on anything, her ears half tuned to any unusual sounds in the house. Just as she's about to close her phone and go to bed, she decides to take a quick glance at her emails, even though she tries not to outside of working hours. It's a boundary she was determined to set when she left her previous job, and she's usually pretty good about sticking to it. Just this once won't hurt. She runs her eyes quickly down the list of new messages and is about to click off when one catches her eye. It's from someone called Hannah Hastings. She's fairly certain she doesn't know who that is, although there is something tugging at her memory. But it's the subject that has snagged her attention, and her heart is already racing before she's even read the message. Subject: Summer Carpenter. Chapter 3. Now. Amy is stepping out of the shower when she hears the doorbell. After the email last night, she'd struggled to get any sleep at all, memories of a night 20 years before rolling on repeat through her mind. She feels wretched, as though she's been through the spin cycle of a washing machine. Her head hurts, and her mouth is dry no matter how much tea she drinks. And now the bloody doorbell is going at 8 in the morning. She peers out of the window to see if she can see anyone, but they're concealed beneath the porch. There's a blue Ford parked a little way down the road that she doesn't recognise, but no clue as to who could be at her door. She's tempted to ignore it, but it's already ringing again, and Benny's barking wildly, so she grabs her dressing gown and runs down the stairs, water dripping down her back. The chain is still on, and she doesn't remove it, opening the door a crack and peering out like a 60s housewife. A woman stands there, younger than her, maybe late 20s, with flaming red hair and an apologetic smile. "Can I help you?" Amy says. The woman moves a little closer to the door. A blast of cool air seeps through the gap and makes Amy shiver. "I'm sorry to bother you so early. My name's Hannah. I sent you an email and—" "No." The word is out before Amy can even think about it. She slams the door shut, leans her back against it, her heart hammering. Her head spins and she feels like she might pass out. What is this woman doing on her doorstep? She sinks to a crouch and takes some deep breaths, trying to let the waves of panic subside. Slowly her breathing returns to normal, and she looks up to find Benny watching her with curiosity from the kitchen door. She holds her hand out, and he trots towards her, nuzzles into her neck. It calms her instantly. Slowly she stands. Is Hannah still there? She creeps away and into the living room, trying to peer round the corner of the window without letting Hannah see her, but it's impossible. Surely she won't still be hanging around. This is like a nightmare. What does she want? After reading the subject of the email last night, at first Amy had refused to read the contents. But the words were already burnt onto her retina. Summer Carpenter. And in the end she'd had to know what it was about. Her whole body shook as she opened it, and as she read, nausea rose in her throat. Dear Amy, I'm sorry to contact you out of the blue. My name is Hannah Hastings, and I present a popular true crime podcast called The Ugly Truth, where I investigate old crimes that were either unsolved or suspicious. I don't know whether you've heard of it. As I'm sure you're aware, this June is the 20th anniversary of Summer Carpenter's death, and I've decided to look into what happened. My research has helped me put together a list of people who knew Summer, and your name comes up frequently. From what you said in the press at the time, I got the impression that you think someone knows more about your friend's death, and that you would love as much as I would to finally have some answers. I wondered whether you might be willing to talk to me. Please think about it. Thank you so much for your time. Best wishes, Hannah Hastings. Remembering that email now, Amy feels sick all over again. She spent the last 20 years trying not to think about Summer, about that night, because doing so was partly what had driven her mad in the first place. She won't do it. She can't. She peers round the window frame again, and almost jumps out of her skin when a face appears on the other side of the glass. Shit! She leaps back, but it's too late, and Hannah is knocking on the door again, gentle but insistent. Fuck! Her heart feels like it's about to beat out of her chest. She presses her palm against it, closes her eyes. She can't let this happen again. But Hannah clearly isn't going to be fobbed off. Pulling her dressing gown tight around her, Amy lifts her chin and marches towards the door, Benny on her heels. Unlatching the chain, she opens the door fully. I don't want to speak to you. Please, Amy, Hannah says, stepping a little closer than Amy is comfortable with. Amy presses her hand against the door and closes it slightly. Hannah is no physical threat, but Amy is more frightened of her than she is of any mysterious stranger creeping around her house in the middle of the night. No, sorry, I'm really not interested. She starts to push the door closed, but Hannah is quicker than her, wedging her foot in the door like a cheap TV detective. What on earth are you doing? Amy says, kicking at Hannah's foot wildly. Hannah holds her hands in front of her, palms facing forward. Placatory. Please, I only want to talk to you. I've already said I don't want to talk to you. I really need your help. I've found something. Amy freezes. Her voice seems to have deserted her, and she stands gawping, goldfish-like, for a few seconds. Finally, curiosity gets the better of her, and she steps back to let Hannah in. Amy plonks the cup of coffee onto the table so hard it almost breaks, droplets of brown liquid flying everywhere. Her hands shake as she takes a seat opposite Hannah, who's watching her curiously. I really am sorry for distressing you so much, Hannah says, taking a sip of her too-hot coffee and trying not to wince. You said, and yet here we are. Amy doesn't mean to be rude. It's not in her nature at all. But this is the one subject she can't seem to control herself over. Hannah leans down and picks up her bag from the floor and pulls out her phone and a pad of paper. She flicks through some scribbled notes, seems to find what she's looking for, and looks up again. Amy waits. So, as I said in my email, I'm looking into Summer's death. Amy nods silently. I know the police closed the case, but when I started looking into it, it quickly became obvious that some things were overlooked. She shrugs. That's why I chose it. She looks up at Amy. Have you ever listened to my podcast? No. Hannah nods, unfazed. No reason why you should have. Basically, I trawl through old stories about crimes that were either never solved or ruled as accidental or similar. When one strikes me as a good candidate for a potential story, I start researching it, and if I decide there's enough to it, I run the story over several weeks, and I reveal what I find out in real time as I find it. She sniffs. So I don't always know whether there's going to be a conclusion before I start, but people don't seem to mind that. In fact, they like it. And you make a living from it? Hannah fixes her with a stare. I have more than 2 million subscribers. It's one of the biggest true crime podcasts in the UK, and I'm good at what I do. So yes, I do. Amy gives a small nod and stares at her cup. Her whole body thrums with tension. She doesn't want this woman here, talking about this. and she really doesn't want to know what Hannah might or might not have found, yet she knows it's inevitable she's about to. It feels like watching a car crash in slow motion, knowing exactly what's going to happen, but being powerless to stop it. She looks up at Hannah. "I've spent the last 20 years trying not to think about that day," she says, her voice wobbly. She clears her throat. I took myself away from it all then, and I've never looked back. So I'm sure you understand that when I say I can't talk about it now, I mean it. Not for some podcast. Not for anything." Hannah nods, leans forward. "And can I ask why?" "Why what?" "Why you took yourself away from it all. Why you were so determined never to talk about it again." Amy doesn't answer, so Hannah carries on, her voice gentler this time. "It's because you agree with me, isn't it? Because you do think someone out there knows more about Summer's death than they're letting on." A roar fills Amy's ears, a flash of memory sparking through her mind. Blue lights, mottled skin, an icy stare. "No!" The word comes out more forcefully than she intended, and she looks up to find Hannah watching her. She shakes her head slowly. "I don't..." she swallows. "Amy, can I ask, did you ever suspect that any of your friends might have had something to do with Summer's death?" Amy shakes her head silently. Her friends, the people she'd loved so much, the people she'd cut out of her life 20 years ago. Can't think about them. Mustn't. But Hannah is reading something out loud now, an old newspaper report, and as much as Amy tries to block her words, she can still hear those names loud and clear. The names of the people she's tried hard not to think about for so long, and they're taking away all the air from her kitchen, making it hard to breathe. Olivia Clark, Henry Campbell, Michael Lambert. "Stop!" Amy pushes her chair back from the table and stands on shaking legs, her breath coming in gasps now. Hannah stands too, two rivals across the expanse of wood. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you." "I can't talk about this to you," Amy says. Her voice wobbles, in danger of cracking entirely. She turns and runs from the room, desperate to get away. She doesn't care where she goes, and by the time she locks the bathroom door behind her and slumps onto the lid of the toilet, she feels like her whole body has deflated. She hangs her head between her knees and sucks in air, trying to calm her pulse, quieten the roaring in her ears. And slowly her thoughts begin to settle, her focus returns, and she lifts her head. There's a scrabbling at the door and she reaches over to let Benny in. "Is she still here, boy?" she whispers into the soft spot behind his velvety ear. But unless Hannah has snuck out quietly, Amy is fairly certain she is still down there, waiting for her to come back and talk. She just needs a minute. She stands and walks to the sink and splashes water on her face. Her mind is racing, torn between wanting to close this whole thing down to protect herself and wanting to find out exactly what Hannah thinks it is that she's discovered. The trouble is, Amy has spent so long shutting this whole thing out that it's become ingrained, a habit, to block out any intrusive thought that even strays towards thinking about Summer and the year she knew her. But maybe it's time. Maybe this is why she's become so stuck in her life for so long, because she's never really let herself move on from it. Perhaps it can't do any harm to at least listen to the woman. Then she can decide what to do. Hannah is standing at the patio doors, looking out at the garden with her back turned, when Amy comes back into the room. Benny skittering on the wooden floor behind her. She turns slowly and smiles. "Your garden is lovely," she says. "Thank you." Amy sits down at the table beside her now cold cup of tea and waits while Hannah sits too. "Do you live here on your own?" Amy nods. Hannah gazes round appreciatively. "It's amazing." "Thank you." Hannah taps her pen against her notepad a couple of times, and Amy wants to shout, "Hurry up, just tell me!" But she waits. Finally, Hannah looks up, her eyes filled with concern. "Look, I'm sorry for barging in here like this. I didn't think it would be opening such a can of worms for you, but clearly this is much harder than I imagined, and I apologise. But let me just say this, from everything I've read so far, I'm fairly certain there's more to Summer's death than what was officially reported. And I think lots of the people who were there that night believed the same. She pauses, as though wondering how to land the killer blow that will win Amy over. Cold Case must have thought so too, because they reopened the case 7 years later. Amy looks up. What? Didn't you know? I assumed they would have spoken to you. They didn't. Strange, Hannah says. But anyway, doesn't it make you wonder what they'd found out, and why they thought it was worth investigating? Amy shakes her head. Surely if they'd found anything, they would have made some arrests. I don't know about that, but I will find out. She leans forward. Listen, I don't like to blow my own trumpet, but I'm good at what I do, Amy. I've had cases reopened and people arrested. She smiles, shakes her head. I'm not saying I'm better than the police, but I am thorough and I don't give up. Now, if what I suspect is right, then there's someone out there who killed your friend, and they've been running around believing they've got away with it for the last 20 years. Of course, the police are unlikely to ever open the case a third time. Why would they, when it was ruled as an accident twice, and when Summer wasn't someone they deemed to be particularly important? I mean, a girl who'd run away from a commune.